Michelle Graves, your host on The Power of Money, and I'm honored to have you as a part of my world in this coming segment. With The Power of Money, as you know, we are interested in three things. First, that you get the necessary education so that you and your family will have the information to do well in these difficult times. The second thing I'm interested in is for you to be empowered to prosper. I want only the best for you, but you can't get that if you don't have the education and then the drive to make it happen. And the final thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is that you be energized. Because life is more than a journey. Life is about living. And so I want you to learn these things and to be empowered and encouraged and energized. I'm Michelle Graves. Now here we go. And welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, affectionately known for the last 40 years as the Money Lady. And if you've been a faithful follower and listener and watcher of my shows over the many, many years I've been doing television and radio, you know that I'm always concerned about your financial prosperity, about you overcoming obstacles, about you winning in the treacherous waters that we are faced with today. And today's show is no exception. And you do want to sit down because I'm calling it exactly the way I see it. For many of you that have been followers, I called inflation before the Fed did. I was talking about it a year before it appeared, and it's on YouTube, stagflation and other things. And the reason being is that as an economist, as an international economist by training, I look for and anticipate certain behaviors and certain outcomes based on the data that is before us. And so today's subject has to deal with brace yourself. The food famine is coming and might truly be here. Did you hear me? Brace yourself. Now, the title is not an original title. It comes from some guys that I liked. They were Christian artists, Hazakim. They were Jewish Messianic singers, and they sang Brace Yourself about 25 years ago. You can listen to them on YouTube. You can listen to them on Apple. You can listen to them everywhere. They're still around. But the song Brace Yourself was an in-your-face kind of song talking about the end days. And it was absolutely way ahead of its time because 25 years ago, people were not thinking like that. But I tell you what, if you listen to the words to that song now, you would have to say, woo, woo, it is here. Sometimes people get a revelation before day, but it does come to pass. So the song was Brace Yourself, and then I added on, the food famine is nigh unto us, as in coming to a neighborhood that has your name on it. All right, so I want to talk about what has been going on and why we are now facing globally as well as nationally a food famine. And again, there's a lot going on globally as well as in our own nation and in your neighborhood with maybe your name on it. But let's start with a few basics just to lay the foundation of why we're facing today. There was a time in history where people were not dependent upon trucks and boats to provide them with food. Why? They grew it themselves. Yeah, that is truly the history of mankind. They depended upon rivers. They depended upon, from time to time, maybe boats. But for the most part, they grew their product. People bought it at the market and they went on. If the river had problems like in Egypt with the Nile, which fed everybody, then it created a problem. It really did. It laid the basis for a famine. In the United States of America, where we've always experienced extraordinary abundance. Now, there are notable exceptions in terms of famine and crops dying from lack of rain, but we had a number of tributaries. The land was rich and fertile for the most part, some parts better than others, but definitely we were not experiencing the food climate that we are in today, where thanks to no rain, zero, we are looking at, and lakes and rivers, Lake Mead, etc., and rivers drying up, which means that people cannot resource even water for themselves. We are now seeing the beginnings of some very, very troubling situations. And of course, California provides over 1/3 of all of our fruits and vegetables. In fact, the numbers are probably even higher. But California hasn't had any rain. And when they do have rain, it's caused incredible flooding, but they have had a lot of fires burning up everything and destroying everything. And they are dealing with pestilence. Again, eating all of the food bugs like to eat too. So you've got in California and other areas, Texas is also experiencing drought conditions, and other parts of the far west. Real major impact on how food is obtained and bought, okay? Because California is on the west, and they have to ship their product utilizing trucks and trains. And on the subject of trains, am I ever glad that they averted that shutdown on the train system? Because, believe it or not, folks, trains move everything between them and trucks and barges, but it's mainly trains moving grains and parts and cars, and they were getting ready to walk. And I'm not saying they were wrong for walking, because they've been trying to get this resolved for some time. But sometimes you just have to deal with what you got to deal with. Those men have families, and they have a life. Their life is not their job. And for the record, the big cats aren't out there working like that. So I'm glad that got resolved. I really am. Now, how are we going to get this issue of food resolved? And the fact that food does not grow in your backyard, although you might want to think about it in the days ahead, because this is not going to get better. It is going to get worse. And you're going to find that distribution venues, also known as grocery stores, drug stores, food stores, are going to be moving quickly into crisis mode. Do not drink the Kool-Aid. This is very serious, what I'm talking about right now. I've told you about California. California is the breadbasket of the United States. As a state, the wine, corn, fruit, all of that is California, followed by the Carolinas and their wonderful rich soil. Okay, but the bulk is coming out of California. And again, they're dealing with drought conditions. They're dealing with an inability to transport products into our neck of the woods. That's known as the supply chain. Now, for years, in the course of my conversation with other economists and financial people, we've talked about the supply chain, not just coming from China, because that's a big one. They transport via boat from mainland China to ports of entry in the United States, San Diego, etc. That's how your products made in China got over here on a boat. They didn't take a train, although as ingenious as they are, I'm sure they thought about how do we put a train tracks through the ocean? Well, they're doing boats, and that's another story for another time. But thanks to all of the things that have begun to occur and haven't really begun, they've been in the motion, but are now on an accelerated pace. where we're dealing with climate change. I remember when Al Gore did his movie that everybody just dismissed. I watched it and I was like, ooh, I better start growing stuff, and I did. Because he was talking about an imperfect truth or something like that. You can Google it and find it out. But what he said was true. He was a forebearer of the climate disaster that we're now facing globally, where even the trees, in case you haven't noticed it, when are the leaves going to start falling? You know, fall is here. Fall. They're still green. They're confused. The animals are confused. Everybody's confused, like, what is going on here? What is going on? We've got all kinds of situations and conditions having to deal with climate. But the biggest issue with climate is it throws a real serious wrench into the plan of the farmers to grow food. It was hot as heck in July. Everything was looking crazy in Ohio. The farmers' corn, which we depend on not to eat, but for them to feed the animals, was looking real funny and stubby. Same thing in other parts of the country, which meant there was going to be a problem with food prices derived from corn. Corn not only feeds animals, but high fructose syrup, which is a derivative of corn, that is what flavors most of our food, including sodas, also known as pop, depending upon where you're going to be watching this show. But the cost of high fructose because of climate is really, really high, and that is not going to be eaten by the farmer. You and I, as consumers, as end users, are going to be those who are going to be paying higher prices for things like, what to drink, what to eat. High fructose is a standard, not sugar, corn. Understand? Corn. Which is why the Ukrainian situation that is still going on was so disturbing, because they not only provided grain sources for a large part of the world, but corn as well, which is a sweetener that is easier to grow and cheaper than your sugar byproducts. So I don't want to get too blistered on all this stuff going on, but it all makes sense and it all connects. And what I want you to be attentive to is, because it all connects, we can say with some level of predictability what is going to be the outcome. Okay? Now, I will also say, and it's major, that the COVID, right, the bad word, blew the world into a spin cycle that it has not yet recovered, where millions of people not only got sick, but died. Okay? Died without planning, preparation, or anything else, and this situation has not changed. So what happens when you have a national crisis of health, where people are sick and dying and cannot transport needed goods and services, starting with China, of course, Wuhan, but China was a major exporter of goods and products into this capitalist country and globally. And when China shut down, and I do mean that communist regime shut down, nothing moved with their own people, and then globally. So we have a food situation whose roots are in the famine, because people were not able to transport food to other parts of the country. It's called the supply chain. They didn't have people to harvest the food because of the pandemic, and also because of the United States' hostile immigration program. And I don't want to get political, but Who do you think was out there harvesting that stuff? Okay? You don't want them over here, so you're content to have the food go bad on the fields. And then the outward consequences, oh, we suffer, but it's okay. No, it's never okay when you're hungry. Hunger provokes world wars. Okay? Trust me. Napoleon's wife, Josephine, I know she wished she kept her mouth shut in the French situation because her crass comments precipitated the French Revolution because people were hungry. And they looked at all the rich, fat people and said, not on my watch. And therein is the French Revolution. Do not tell me that food does not have consequences, because history tells us it does. And it tells us that countries have warred against each other over food. Egypt was considered a breadbasket. And that is why Italy and the Roman Empire wanted Egypt, because that's a nice stash in terms of regular food and wheat and grains and other products. Okay? So I'm giving you kind of a background to let you know, please don't dismiss, she's talking about food famine. I'm not hungry yet. Right. Because it could be in your neighborhood and even at your doorstep. That's how real it can get. Okay? And I'm telling you, just evolving. We've got a climate mess. So food cannot be produced successfully. Then you've got a harvesting mess because of hostile immigration policies. People are not coming up to do the regular harvesting that is so necessary. So food rots right where it is. Nobody's there to pick it. It rots. And then you have the truckers not able to truck the food because we have a trucking problem with truckers not being able to move product. Why? Because gasoline prices on diesel are high. The number of truckers has fallen because the old guys are done. And cross-country moves are not appealing. That's why you see all the heavy solicitation of young people to drive these trucks. Because the old guys are like, I'm done, my back's bad, my feet hurt, and my eyes are just messed up, and the government is regulating everything. And I don't want any parts of it. Well, there are consequences. Okay, so the food can't get transported. And did I forget, like I said, we're dealing with a drought. So even if you can get food without water and rain and lake access, the food is going to rot right there on the vine, for real. So you've got all of this, and that has caused the price of everything to go north, as in high, called inflation, where demand exceeds supply and prices reflect that increase, and they're high. Our prices are high, folks. In case you haven't looked around, it's expensive to eat. Now, how are you going to make something that's so basic and fundamental as food so expensive? Well, it's got to get there, and those costs have to be passed on to you. And before it gets there, it's got to grow. So you've got all these things going, and inflation is real. Now, let's talk about inflation, because I talked about inflation a year ago, and I said, hello, Federal Reserve Chairman, U.S. Treasury Chairwoman Janet Yellen. I said, your data is not good, and we're going down this road, and inflation, which is the bane of all countries. Inflation pushed us into World War II because the Germans were literally starving because the food prices had gone through the roof. Nothing personal, but I'm not interested in another world war over food and power. And it looks like we may be heading for something in the winter because of oil. And because the Russians have said that you can think whatever you want to think about us, but we're going to do this anyway and stop me. Stop me. And if you don't like it, watch what I'm going to do to you. That's some kind of, Darth Vader. I gave him a name a long time ago. For those of you that are Star Trek fans, and I'm one, I love it. I love all the series. I love anything dealing with nefarious, evil men, okay? Because it shows me what a deviant personality will do. And when you have no boundaries and you got all the money and all the resources, what you're capable of doing. And for the record, what they are doing. And don't think I'm against Ukraine, because I'm not. Valiant people, courageous people. But if you're a Star Trek fan, you know what that looks like, okay? Because evil uncontrolled is just evil uncontrolled. And there we go. So getting back to this issue of food, we know that in Europe and in parts of Africa and Asia, they are already experiencing a food crisis, a food shortage, because they can't get the grains efficiently moved from Ukraine to parts of the world, including Africa, including parts of Asia, including China and Europe. Europe's issues are more related to oil, but they all tied into grains as well. Poor Europe. Europe has never been successful, never, in growing a lot of anything. They've had to bring things in. They've had to weather out horrible conditions. And, they ate a lot of meat, because if you can't grow vegetables, you eat pigs. So there you go. Saying all this to say, looking at what's going on over there with their supply chain blowout, and then coming over here and looking at ours, I can tell you the only difference is the space of water between two continents known as the Atlantic. Because in America, the inability to get food to a distributor such as your local Piggly Wiggly's, Kroger's, and a host of others, that Myers, that sell product, they don't manufacture, they're distributors. They get the product in, that's what the trucks do, drop the product out, and then you buy it. Well, anything that's flawed in that concept is going to create major problems. We know that food prices are high because you cannot get food in at an affordable cost, and they're going to pass it on because they're not in the business of feeding you free. It also means that people, despite the subsidy programs we've had, SNAP and the pandemic, those programs are coming to conclusion, and people still are hungry. So who do they turn to when money's running funny, as we would say? Well, that's the role of the food bank. The food bank is there to catch up for the holes that you have in your food budget. You don't have enough money at the end of the month, your SNAP card's zeroed out, you've used all you can under the pandemic allocation, so you go to the food bank. And the food bank has been a trusted resource for years. This is not new. It's been commonly used by people that are poor, people that cannot sustain, elderly people that are on fixed incomes, and mothers, women that have babies that need milk and other things. It's been an institution. But now with everything drying up, and the food banks, just as a history, the food banks acquire their food from donations from end users like grocery stores that have excess inventory. They do not. Fresh fruit has a shelf life. They donate. The money, you can make donations. The money they raise, they go and buy food from the U.S. Department of Ag. Okay. These have been pretty predictable. Churches have done food banks, again, to help their congregations and people within their demographic area. Vital. But what happens when grocery stores don't have food? Because the food they have, they're pushing it out to the public. What happens when churches are not getting adequate donations to give away food? That is real, okay? And then finally, when the U.S. Department of Agriculture is having major problems in distributing its food, peanut butter and other things, staples, because again, the performance and productivity of farmers is not where it could be on the West Coast and other areas. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is a huge enterprise to distribute food, and they don't give it away. You buy from the U.S. Department of Agriculture by the pound. Food banks have to pay them to buy this food. So where does the food money come from? Donations. People write checks to the food bank. Corporations make tax-deductible contributions to the food bank. But if everybody's pressed and donations are down, and they are, people are not giving away nothing. They're moving quickly into a survival mode. And so now the cost of a food bank to buy goods and services, primarily goods from the Department of Ag, I believe it was around 46 cents last year, is now over $1. So they need more money to buy the same amount, and of course the prices are higher. Many of their shelves nationally are empty. They don't have anything. And they're really trying to hold on because they recognize, as I said, you can't have people hungry when all of the resources that are available are now being discontinued and people are having to survive on very little. The school lunch program that was active during the summer is no longer active. So what is going to happen here, folks? Well, I just told you, prepare yourself, brace yourself, as Hazakim said, brace yourself. Brace yourself. What are you doing to order your family's budget so that you do not find yourself in a very, very uncomfortable and challenging situation? Now, for those of you smarty pants that call yourself economists and strategic planners, etc., that say, well, I don't know why they're having a food problem. Everybody's employed. The unemployment rate is down. And I will say to you, and who can eat on $15 an hour and pay rent and pay the gas and electric and utility companies? Oh, yeah. And winter is coming, predictably, no doubt. Who can do and pay for these food costs, if you haven't looked lately, through the roof? Who can do that on $15 an hour with 2 children or 3 children? Or just yourself? Who can do that? So when they toss out, oh, we're looking at full employment, first thing, there's no such animal in the world that I come from. But even with very positive unemployment rates, they have not factored in the number of people that are not even in the workplace. I worked for the Bureau of Labor Statistics when I was in graduate school in Washington, D.C. And that's what we looked at, data from all kinds of places all the time. Fascinating. Fascinating, because we don't count people that have dropped out. They're called non-participants. We don't count them. We only count people that are actively seeking work. Well, you already know, based on that data, the information is not going to be accurate and it's not going to be crisp, because a lot of people with this pandemic were either too sick to try to work, had to take care of kids with no daycare and no babysitters, were trying to figure out how to transport themselves with gas prices that were over $4 a gallon and going higher, unless you were in metropolitan areas like New York City, and that's not the world. Okay, most people are dependent upon public transportation, maybe, but primarily cars. I mean, come on, that's how Detroit got a history. Okay, cars, lots of them, but not at $4 and $5 a gallon. Okay, so people just said, I can't afford it, and all those F-10s running around, I don't think so, I can't do it, and they bailed out. Now, employers, you don't have to have a PhD in economics to figure this out, which is gas prices are up, Rents are up because, again, landlords saw opportunity and they did what they do, jack rent up for everybody, including seniors. I mean, that's a crime. Really? Real estate went through the roof, so people that wanted to buy couldn't buy. They were stuck renting. And then inflation on top of gas and rent and fuel costs, and now food and everything else. I mean, you can't even, let me tell you how deep inflation is. I used to be a big proponent of women saving money by doing thrift stores and garage sales and swapping with each other. Yeah, we all grow clothes, so we have a swap meet and we swap clothes with each other, and who cares, because, I mean, we're just doing it. I do not recommend that anymore. I'm telling you, I'm not paying $20 for a dress that someone donated to you, and you're going to mark it up and put it on the rack. That's called inflation. And that's more than 100%, because you think about the dress was donated free. You got to sort it, tag it. What is that, $1? And you sell it for $19.99? I mean, really? Shoot. No. There's something wrong here. But we're not talking about thrift stores. We're talking about food famine and what happens when the food cannot reach its final destination, and when there's not enough money available to enable food banks to provide to their constituency. I think it's estimated that over 32 million people take advantage of this once a month, and the numbers have skyrocketed. That to me is significant, because it tells me that if you can't provide the food because you can't get it and it's unaffordable, what is the American consumer that's having hard time supposed to do? Are we going back to the Depression? And when I say that, it's not like this is Africa, where you got trees and apples and all kinds of fruit growing on the sideway, on the going from point A to point B. People can live off of fruit just by climbing a tree and eating it. In the United States of America, if you do that, you may be arrested. I'm serious. For trespassing, for eating government property. I mean, come on. And my grandmother gave me a story in the Great Depression before she crossed over about how people, there was an apple tree in the community. It was on someone's property, but the apple tree had wonderful apples. And people would try to eat them and then even sell them. And how to feed their families, did you hear me? To feed their families. And they were getting shot. I mean, they were getting shot. Not by the owner of the tree, but by the police for trespassing. My God, stop. Time out. Don't taser me over an apple, okay? God gives it abundantly. And sorry, if you're not going to eat it, why do I have to die? It's that mindset that I see doing a here we go again thing. Okay, peaches, apples, fruits, if they cannot be harvested efficiently and they cannot reach destination on time, then you're going to have a mess. And I agree with some farmers that said, if you're willing to drive to my farm with a basket, I charge you $1 and you can harvest all the trees you want. I like that, and I'm game for that all day long. I don't have a problem climbing a tree, because you know I'm a country girl. I'll do a tree to get peaches and other things. But again, the whole issue of it not being able to reach destination, and what is that going to do for our nation as we move into winter? Yes, it's coming. And if you live in Florida, not winter, hurricanes and typhoons. And if you live in California, drought and more fires. Okay? Or if you live in Alaska, typhoon and cyclone. What the heck? Is anybody thinking like I'm thinking? I didn't even know Alaska rolled like that. I really didn't. But I do now because it messed up a lot, tore up a lot, climate change. And I'm just wondering how are they going to get their food as they go into the twilight months because they are so far north, the sun doesn't peep out but a few hours every day. So if they can't get a good supply chain or source of food, they're going to be in trouble. Of course, the Eskimos will tell you that's why you do other things. That's why you hunt. But can you really see an American in groups, large groups, circling around and hunting for squirrels, rabbits, chickens, deer to eat? The majority of people have been conditioned to buy their food at a grocery store or a food mart. Farmers markets, I'm all for them. I think you should do it and do it big time. Okay? I'm looking myself to buy a ton of apples because apples are sustaining. I'm not talking about on the shelf. I'm talking about from the farmer, buying a bushel of apples, making apple butter, eating them, storing them, keeping them in a cool place. Same thing for potatoes and other things. You can Google this information on your computer. Vegetables that can withstand cold weather. That should be your go-to, all right? Because if you're not prepared for what is coming down now, okay, when I saw the article, and you can find the article, I was reading our local paper on Sunday, and they did a big story on food scarcity, okay, in Ohio. I read it in its entirety, including the empty shelves from the food bank, and I said to myself, this is here a little sooner than you had predicted. And you probably need to give people a warning and a heads up to get it together. Cold weather, get it together. It's called quilts. A lot of them, quilts. Christmas, do something different. Okay? Do something different. It's coming. Holidays are coming. All right? The children want Halloween, but that's going to be scary. You don't need to wear a costume because we're going into Halloween as a country, period. Now you can say, oh, but Miss Graves, stop giving us gloomy news. I'm giving you information so that you can begin to make and take the necessary steps to protect you and your family through proper planning. It's called food planning, by making sure that you have all of the things that are necessary when this thing goes, to not depend upon the largesse and generosity of our government to take care of you. That's what I'm saying. And I hope you listen, because if not, you're going to go into panic along with millions of other people, and you're going to go running to the store, and the shelves are really going to be bare. Okay? So don't talk to me about the bear of bad news, because actually, if you're wise, you will say, this is great news. I now know how to order my steps so that me and my family will not be out here looking funny. I had the experience of being in Detroit, Michigan. That's right. When the bucket fell out with the car industry. You may not be aware, they filed bankruptcy and everything went hairy-carry, including thousands of people that lost their jobs, period. Families without a place to live. This is not a new story. People being evicted with the clothes on their back. And I had more than one experience in terms of bringing people that were lined up in barrels that had heat, bringing them cereal and milk, and letting them pour the milk in the cereal container with a plastic spoon and letting their children eat it. I'm telling you, it's not pretty. And that shook me so badly, because I don't like to see children hungry. I can deal with grown people hungry, but I can't deal with children hungry. I want to make sure their bellies are full, and that even if they're cold, you can huddle together. But a child that is hungry is just something I can't cope with. So I'm giving you the information so that you can begin to take the steps now to get it done. Yeah, I am. And to do what is necessary, thanks to the power of internet. Even if you don't have a computer, every public library does. And you can go there and you can research this, and plus it's nice and warm. The public library is funded, they keep the temperatures right, and you can go there and do the research and take your children to read books. What a great time. And then begin to determine what you want to do and how you need to do it. I would definitely say to everybody within the sound of my voice that being in a cold city, when the weather turns cold, like Detroit, Michigan, or Chicago, or Buffalo, New York, or even New York City, to be homeless, resourceless, and not know what you're going to do except depend upon the kindness of people, that's not a plan. I would suggest to you, for real, that you consider heading south, where it's warm, and where at the very least the people are cordial and friendly. Southern people are very nice people, by the way. They are. They've been raised to be nice. You starve up north. That's what my grandmother told me. She never lied. You go up north, you're going to starve, because they're not going to feed you, they're not going to house you, and they're not going to give you but their worst looking clothes. I'm not saying that her observations were accurate, but I did take them to heart. And I am in the north, and I'm not looking to anybody to do anything for me, which is why I'm telling you this now. The food famine is going to happen. The Department of Agriculture just released in the last 2 days before this broadcast, I think they released $1.5 billion that they gave to these food banks, etc., to be able to buy food from them. I can't figure it out. You're going to give them money to buy from them. Okay, it must be accounting. But sorry, folks, that's not enough money when you got hungry people. You need to sell, give away, shouldn't say sell, give away your stock and take care of the farmers who are giving you the food. Because they're the ones really that are going to make a difference in how we go through this. Because there's something horribly broken when a farmer cannot get his or her product to an end user. That there's something broken in that system. We should consider this a national emergency and provide them with trucks and everything else they need so they can haul this stuff out and get it into the hands of people that are hungry. And if anybody gets paid, it needs to be those farmers who are having to do this, because they are feeding this country. Those farmers out in California that are barely making it, you need to consider it a national emergency and give them some money so that they can get, you pay everybody else, folks. I mean, if the money machine stopped rolling right now, Europe would be history, Ukraine will have lost the war, and we continue printing money. I need us to have a plan for here. Is that okay? Can we pay them to feed us? Okay? Can't we? Can't we give them some money? Can't we get them some trucks? And can't they feed us? Okay? Because it's going to look like that in a minute. I mean, for real. And in Ohio, the Carolinas and Virginia are the closest to us. And Georgia, they can go up 75. But my point is that there have to be creative solutions beside, we're going to give them some more money and let them pay us to buy this stuff. No, That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you paying the farmers and giving them resources to transport food to other parts of the country so that we might be able to eat, and that you subsidize them so that they can subsidize us so that we don't have to pay a fortune to eat this stuff. Does that sound counterintuitive? Or am I just seeing it differently? Because the reality is the people that are growing the food are barely making it. And that's criminal. That's criminal because, like I said, we can go into history. Absence of food is a formula for a war. And we're getting ready to go into it in Europe and in Russia. Yep, we're going into it. And God save the king, because Britain is in it now. Yeah, they're in it right now. They cannot get a handle on inflation. And of course, they don't have anything. I mean, they had a phenomenal army, and that's why they colonized everybody, because they knew how to shoot people, but they couldn't grow nothing because it's always overcast, the weather is inhospitable, and hey, they did what they needed to do to expand, which is I'm going to conquer you so that I have food. Okay, that's known as sugar and all that stuff. And they did it over here in the United States. What are you talking about? That's why we had the American Revolution. Food. Got it? Food. Think about that. Food will cause a war. Okay? Food and the absence of food will cause a war. Will give the people such a sense of despair that they don't feel they have any options. And I'm suggesting to you, and I'm not telling you what to do, because I don't do that in America, because we have this belief system that if I want to starve, it's my right, it's my privilege, this is a democracy. I can starve. You're going to. Or you're going to wind up being creative in how you take care of yourself and your family. Okay? During the Great Depression, grandmother said they sold apples so that people would have something in their belly. Do you know what it's like to be hungry and to be cold and to not have water? Does that sound like something out of a third world country? Oh, excuse me, wrong term. A lesser developed country. Does that sound like something you'd want? Okay. Is that something you think you could live with? Then listen to what I just said and handle your affairs appropriately. Okay? I took a seed out of one of the peaches I bought, and I said, I think I'm going to grow myself a peach tree this next time around. I'm going to start it in a pot at home, and springtime, I'm putting that thing in the ground. Now, my hope is, because a peach tree grows slow, but it grows steady, that the animals won't be able to get to it, because I do have a major problem with animals and deer and everything. They come over to eat, and they don't even have the grace to say, do you mind? We just eat it. Mums, tomatoes, anything and everything is game. And I guess I'm saying this because maybe I need to be paying attention. All right? They don't discriminate on property lines or anything else. They come over, get what they want, defecate, and keep moving. And I said, is this a sign? Is it a sign when they bring their families and they're all over there, children included, doing the same thing? I don't want to miss any indications, because nature always tells us what is to come first. And I don't want to miss it. But I'm saying to you, and for those of you that are not worried at all because you got a bundle of money and you're going to be fine and we save and we this, just look at the French Revolution. Your wealth will not protect you from starving people. It didn't work. Okay, they just look at history. And no, shooting a rocket to the moon and to Mars is not going to work, because you got to take food there too. Unless you think people are going to be there to greet you and say, hey, eat some of mine. No, I'm not kidding about this. I am so serious about this that I am struggling even right now as I think about going into Medicare season, because I do deal with Medicare and people having to make a choice between food, medicine, and rent. Because if you're hungry, you're not going to be thinking about medicine. You're going to be thinking about, how am I going to get through this and get my stuff paid? So I'm not really thrilled right now to give you any of this, but it is important to me that at least you heard it from me. At least you heard it from me, because I have nothing to gain by giving you this kind of information. But in giving you this information, I can prepare you and your family and your loved ones for what is to come. Okay? I firmly believe that gasoline prices are never in history going down to $1.50 or even $1.99 again. I do not believe wages are going to get better. I do not believe that people are going to be doing better. The rich may be getting richer, but it's futile, because the majority of people in this country, the United States of America, are not rich people. And so I would give a heads up to rich people. You better learn the act of writing checks and being generous, so that compassion can be extended to you and your family. There is a law of reciprocity. What you give out does come back. And it may be just what you need, because to me, the whole notion of you being a billionaire and having people all around you who are spying, who are poor, who can't, in your estimation, well, they need to get a job. Well, you made your money off of trust income and dividends and stock assets. You didn't get out there and bust a brick. Not this generation. Now, 4 generations ago when you came over here on a boat, maybe. But even that, you had to have some money to get more money. But many people today, from all walks of life, have nothing. And you may want to think about that, okay? I'm not here to create anything other than to deal with information and resources and an analysis to enable you to see what is coming down the pike. Do I believe the Fed is going to raise rates? Of course. They better. They better raise interest rates to cap this flurry of spending, all this money out here. And they will. Trust me, they will. Are wage rates going to match the economy's production? No. Why? Because folks at the top are greedy. That's why we almost had a rail strike. These men are like, I'm killing myself. And I read the paper just like you, and I see all of you making all this money. Well, that's America. No. Think different. Think about the people that really should get paid, which is our farmers. They really should get paid. And they should get paid abundantly and first. They should have the access to the technology, to the resources, to the distribution resources. They should be able to buy equipment with zero interest to transport this stuff, to feed us, and they should be honored as American heroes. Because in the days ahead, listen to me carefully, in the days ahead, you would wish you knew farmers where you could get your chicken eggs, which is, by the way, where I get mine. I get mine from farmers, okay, with real chickens, as well as other things. They're our heroes, okay? Not the fat cat. They are. They're the ones that work hard and work long to make sure that we don't have growling, hungry stomachs. and they make the least. In the supply chain, they're at the bottom. There's something wrong with this story. So I'm concluding today's session of the power of money. Brace yourself. Hazakim. The food famine is nigh unto us and even is here. I hope you've learned and processed properly and pass this on to your friends. It's on YouTube. Pass it on. Tell them I learned something today. And I'm getting ready to make some moves, me and my family. Oh, don't listen to her. Don't listen to me. You better listen to somebody who really does know, based on the data and information, that this is coming. This is what I do for a living. I advise and guide people and assist them so that they will not be broke. That's what I do. I do not have a traditional perspective. I look at everything. And when I see certain indicators, I'm going to say something. And I'm going to recommend accordingly. So on today's session, I thank you for being a part of my world. I appreciate your support. I appreciate the things that you are changing in your life because of what I've shared with you. And if I could ever help you, give me a call, 800-734-3915. That's been my 800 number for years. I do return calls, okay? And I do encourage you to listen and listen with the spirit of wisdom. Wisdom says, take care of yourself and your family. Look to God to guide you and to lead you. And at the end of the day, recognize that your neighbor may be the very person who feeds you when you're hungry. You all take care of yourself. God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.